I grabbed the thermal bag containing the first order of the night and checked the address on the slip. It was a house I hadn't delivered to before, located in a quiet part of town. As I approached the neighborhood, the houses grew further apart and the streetlights became sparse. Not knowing this end of town, I ended up getting a bit lost and decided to call the customer for clearer directions to their house. They guided me towards the property, which actually wasn't too far from where I already was. I could actually see the faint outline of the property with the light from my car's headlights. As I neared the front door, I heard whispers. It wasn't the typical sort of conversation you'd hear from a family awaiting their dinner. It was hushed and had an edge of urgency. I couldn't make out the words, but something wasn't right. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door. The whispering stopped. A moment later, the door opened, revealing a middle-aged couple. They seemed perfectly ordinary. The woman had a neat bob haircut, and the man wore glasses and a sweater. "Large pepperoni?" "Yes, that's ours," the man responded, handing over the cash. They both seemed calm. The woman smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Enjoy your meal," I said, turning to leave. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Before I could reach for the car door, my phone vibrated. A message notification from the customer's number lit up the screen. "Help us. They are not our parents." My heart raced. I glanced back at the house. The curtains moved slightly, as if someone was watching from behind them. Taking a few deep breaths, I considered the possibility it could have been a prank. Some kid, messing around. Still, I couldn't ignore the whispers I'd heard or the urgency in that message. I decided to call my boss and inform him of the strange situation. He advised me to head back to the shop and not get involved. "Probably some teenager trying to spook you. Just be on your way." But as I drove off, the weight of the message hit me. What if someone in that house was genuinely in danger? But then, what could I possibly do? The message on my phone bore into my mind. I began driving aimlessly, hoping distance might help me think clearer. I circled the block multiple times, passing the house with each round. Each glance reinforced my dread. After the fourth pass, I mustered the courage to stop the car and confront the situation. Maybe I could find a way to discreetly check things out. If anything seemed genuinely amiss, I could call the police. Parking a couple of houses down, I approached with caution. This time, the house was silent. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. The front door, slightly ajar, opened with the faintest creak. The living room appeared undisturbed. I proceeded to the kitchen, where the scene turned chilling. The table was overturned, and fragments of a shattered plate littered the floor. On a chair nearby lay remnants of rope and tape, and most disturbingly, a small, stained knife that appeared recently used. The back door stood wide open, hinting at an escape. My heart raced as the gravity of the situation hit me. The message wasn't a prank. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, relaying the scene to the operator. Within minutes, the house was swarming with police officers. They searched the premises, but found no sign of the couple or the children. Neighbors were questioned, but nobody seemed to have noticed anything unusual. The investigation revealed the sinister truth. The kids had been kidnapped and held captive by the imposters who posed as their parents. By the time I had returned to the house, they'd sensed danger and fled. The kids were found a couple of days later, terrified but unharmed, in an abandoned barn on the outskirts of town. Their reunion with their real parents was tearful and filled with relief. Grateful, the family reached out to thank me. They believed my unintended interference had pressured the kidnappers to abandon their sinister plan and flee. The police investigation and search for the kidnappers is ongoing. It was a typically cold Halloween night, the kind where the autumn wind seems to cut right through your jacket. I had been working at the local pizzeria for the past 2 years, and Halloween nights were always the busiest. People tucked in their homes watching horror movies often ordered in. This particular night, most of my deliveries had been to neighborhoods decorated with the usual Halloween flair: carved pumpkins, fake cobwebs, and kids running around in costumes. However, as the night wore on and the families retired inside, the streets became eerily silent. I had one last delivery before I could call it a night. The address led me to a part of town that was relatively isolated, one where houses were more spread out. The GPS guided me to a long, winding driveway, ending at a house set far back from the road. The house was large and old, with tall windows and a wide front porch. Though it seemed like any other old house, something about its isolation and the darkness surrounding it made me feel on edge. I parked my car, took a moment to gather myself, and stepped out. I could hear the distant sound of celebrations from far-off houses, but nothing from this one. I approached the front door, the pizza box growing cold in my hands. Before I could ring the bell, I noticed a note taped to the door. "Come around the back, doorbell's broken." I hesitated. This was unconventional, but I figured they probably just didn't want the hassle of walking all the way to the front of the house. I started to walk around the side, my footsteps crunching on the gravel, making the silence all the more pronounced. Reaching the back, I found a patio with a slightly ajar sliding door leading inside. Beyond the glass, the house was dark, save for the faint flicker of what looked like candlelight. I called out, "Pizza delivery," but received no reply. Not wanting to trespass, I waited a few moments. When no one came, I considered leaving the pizza on the patio table and going back, but something compelled me to take another look. As I leaned in to peer through the sliding door, I noticed something. Footprints. Wet, muddy footprints leading from the patio into the house. They looked fresh, and they weren't the kind of footprints you'd expect from shoes. They were barefoot. Trying to shake off the growing dread, I decided that maybe leaving the pizza on the patio table was the best choice. I gently set the box down. I was about to head back to my car when I noticed a soft glow emanating from one of the windows on the upper floor. Squinting to get a clearer view, I saw what looked like a television screen displaying static. That wasn't particularly unusual, but the way the light played on the walls, casting fleeting shadows, added to the edginess. And then I heard a distinct sound, a door creaking open slowly from inside the house. I took a step back, straining my ears to listen. There were no footsteps, no voices, just that slow creak of a door, and then silence again. Thoughts raced through my mind. Should I call out? Should I simply leave? Every instinct screamed at me to walk away, but something about the situation kept me rooted. Maybe it was a sense of duty, or just sheer curiosity, but I felt compelled to at least make sure everything was all right. Taking a deep breath, I approached the sliding door, pushing it open just a bit more. "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice sounded far too loud in the silence. Deciding it best not to wander further into the unknown, I turned to see the television light flicker and then go off completely, plunging the upper floor into darkness. The chill of the night suddenly felt even colder, and I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Without wasting another second, I made my way back around the house. I had nearly reached my car when I heard it, a soft, muffled sound, almost like crying. It seemed to be coming from one of the ground floor windows. I turned around and tiptoed closer, trying to pinpoint the source. Pressing my ear against the cold window pane, the crying became clearer, but there were no words, just soft sobs. What should I do? But as I strained to listen further, the crying abruptly stopped. I took a step back and saw a weird, small, shadowy figure darting away from the property, disappearing into the trees. Panic set in. I scrambled to my car, not daring to look back, and sped away from that isolated house as fast as I could. The rest of the night was a blur. I told my manager about the strange events, and we reported it to the police. They did a thorough check of the house, but found nothing amiss. They told us that the house had been abandoned for years, and suggested it might have been kids playing tricks on Halloween. To this day, I don't know what really transpired in that house. The memory of that night still haunts my dreams, and I avoid that part of town whenever I can. Whatever or whoever was in that house, I don't actually think I want to know. I'd been running my small pizza business for 2 years when he approached me. The influencer, as he liked to call himself. Local fame from online posts, photography, and the frequent trend-setting opinions. "You supply the pizzas and I'll give you exposure," he promised, flashing his smartphone with thousands of followers on his profile. The deal was tempting. The digital age was upon us, and everyone was talking about brand presence online. I thought this could be my break. The first order arrived, 10 large pizzas, a variety of flavors. He wanted them delivered to his swanky loft for a party. "Think of the audience," he had texted. It was a big order for my little business, but I hoped for the best. As days turned into weeks, he continued to order more, and each time he assured exposure. I would always check his socials, waiting for that shout-out, that tag, anything. But every post was about his life, his party, and his fame. Not a single mention of my pizzas. The excitement turned sour. Was he just exploiting the promise of exposure? 1 month in and 40 pizzas later, I hadn't gained much in the way of extra business. I reached out, confronting him about the arrangement. He was dismissive. "Give it time. These things don't happen overnight." But I'd given time. And pizza. A lot of pizza. After 2 months, I decided it was enough. The next time his order popped up on my screen, I refused. I expected complaints, maybe some bargaining, but the response was cold silence. Days later, my phone buzzed with notifications. Negative reviews, angry comments, pictures of supposedly rotten pizzas I'd never made. He was on a smear campaign against me. It felt like I was being canceled online. I tried to counter his narrative, sharing my side of the story, but my small following was no match for his online army. My business ratings plummeted. Weeks of this online assault took a toll on me. The stress, the helplessness. It was a different kind of dread, one that lurked in the shadows of the digital realm. A text arrived from an unknown number. "Meet me. Let's settle this." It was followed by an address to a car park, quite far from the city's hustle and bustle, at night. I was torn. On one hand, I wanted this ordeal to end. On the other hand, every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea. But how much more damage could he do online? Maybe face-to-face, man-to-man, we could find common ground. The car park was desolate, and I parked and waited. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw the influencer approaching. 2 large bodyguards flanked him as he got out of his car, their intentions unmistakably hostile. Without preamble, the influencer signaled, and the 2 men began advancing. Their pace was deliberate, their silence more threatening than any words. It was clear the influencer intended to escalate our disagreement to something more physical, perhaps to teach me a lesson. As the bodyguards closed in on me, a chilling realization dawned. I was in a dimly lit car park, far from help, with no witnesses in sight. Panic surged through my veins, but I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to think fast. I sprinted towards the nearest exit, the influencer shouting threats behind me, but I didn't look back. I could hear the thudding of their footsteps as they gave chase. I burst out of the car park and onto a dimly lit street. I flagged down a passing car, desperately pleading for help. The driver agreed to take me to the nearest police station. As I sat in the safety of the police station, I recounted the entire ordeal to the officers. They assured me they would investigate what had happened and warned me to stay vigilant. Following the incident, the online harassment from the influencer and his followers continued, but at least I was safe in the physical world. That was until I received another text. "Running won't save you," it read. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine as I stared at the message. The feeling of being watched returned with a vengeance. I decided I had to take matters into my own hands. Determined to put an end to this nightmare, I went online. I combed through every post, comment, and photo related to the influencer that I could find. The more I dug, the darker the rabbit hole became. It turned out that he was no ordinary influencer. He had a sinister reputation in the deep corners of the internet. The stories were filled with unsettling tales of those who had dared to cross his path. Underground accounts of aggressive behavior and coercement were rife. Eventually, the online harassment stopped. Maybe something happened to him, or maybe he got bored. But I can't help feeling that he's out there watching, waiting and biding his time for me or the next victim to cross his path.